So, Tzoharaim Tovim, good afternoon, everybody. Welcome back to another edition of Beit Midrash. Glad y'all are here. Glad y'all are joining us, and glad to be learning together today. Full confessional. I'll be completely transparent. I called an audible today about 15 minutes ago. Stuart's laughing. Everybody know what an audible is?
You mean the audible, like reading the books?
No.
Oh, okay, then I have no idea.
Stuart, you want to explain? Because you're
well, I didn't know that Rabbi was such a sports fan, but an audible typically refers in football to a situation where there was a plan, like a play was called. There was a plan, and they get up about to institute the plan, and the quarterback notices that the way that things are set up, that plan is not going to work. So he yells out to the team a certain change in the plan, and then they do the audible. They play the audible rather than what was planned before. Is that
he changes the play just before based on circumstance. He changes the play and decides to do something completely different.
Got it?
That's what we're doing today. I had sit here all week. I'm like, this is what we're going to learn. This is what we're going to learn. I'm like, I don't know. I don't know. That's what we're going to learn today. So we're doing something slightly different. So
In my house, Jonathan just calls Tammy.
he just calls what?
In my house, Jonathan just calls that a Tammy.
In sports terminology, it's called an audible. I am a big sports fan. So, anyway, so we can talk sports another time, Stuart. But we're going to do I called an audible, and I realized we had a while back looked at Rebbe Nachman of Breslov, but we're going to take another look at him today and another one of core teachings of Rebbe Nachman today. So let me put it up on the screen. Hopefully you all can see that. Yes. Yes. Confirming. Okay.
Yes.
I'm going to confirm it made it up on the screen correctly. So just another brief summary of Rebbe Nachman for those who might not remember. He is a great grandson of the Baal Shem Tov, the founder of Hasidism, and founded a community in Breslov and Uman, which still exists today. I really don't know what the condition of it is, because Uman is in Ukraine, and there's a pilgrimage that goes on for Rebbe Nachman's yurtzeit, and like thousands of people gather at his grave in Uman to pray and to ask him to bless them and to give them whatever. Don't know what the condition, given the war in Ukraine, I really don't know what the condition of Uman or Rebbe Nachman's grave is. Bimheira v'yameinu, sometimes quickly, hopefully the war will be over and we'll be able to find out more. But he is influential in the history of the Hasidic movement, if for no other reason than, along with Chabad Lubavitch, his is one of two dynasties that seem to have survived without their head after the passing of the Rebbe. Chabad had a Rebbe for a long time, for many years, and then after Schneerson passed away, he didn't designate a successor, and there is no Rebbe in the movement currently, other than Schneerson, who they still refer to as the Rebbe. But in fact, if you say the Rebbe, everybody knows you're talking about Schneerson. But Breslov is still around, and Breslov is still alive and kicking, particularly strong in Israel. I think they do have a presence in Los Angeles too, but particularly in Israel, they have a strong presence. So let's do a little Rebbe Nachman learning today. Who wants to kick us off? Reading for us.
Can you enlarge the font a little bit? Is that possible?
Yeah, I can do it a little bigger.
Thank you, Stuart. I have that same problem.
Is that better?
Yeah.
Okay. I kind of guess at a percentage that works, and if it doesn't work, just let me know. I can make it bigger.
I'll read.
Okay.
Know that it is necessary to judge each person favorably. Lakaf zachat Even if a person is,
L'chas
oh, zechut.
It means like it actually comes from that phrase comes from Pirkei Avot. You judge every person l'chas hut. The idea is kind of like a balance. A chaf actually is like a palm of your hand. It's kind of like a balance, and you balance towards the side of merit. You judge people towards merit, towards being favored.
Even if a person is entirely evil, you must search and find some small good, since through that little bit, the person was not evil. Through finding a little bit of good and judging that person favorably, you truly elevate that person to the side of merit, and that person is able to do teshuva. This is a little more, and he is not wicked. You consider his place, and he is no more. Psalm 37:10. You want me to stop or keep going?
Keep going. You can finish the paragraph, and then we'll discuss.
This verse warns us to judge everyone favorably. Even if you see someone entirely evil, nevertheless, you need to search and seek to find in him or her some small good where there is no wickedness. This is a little more, and he is not wicked.
Good. Questions, comments, thoughts? Yes, Margaret.
That reminds me, I went to a Quaker school, so that reminds me of the teaching that there is a little light of God in everybody.
Beautiful. Yes. Exactly. Like, you see somebody who's doing something bad, you judge them as being a bad person, but Rabbi Nachman saying, okay, but you still got to find something good in them also.
What if, Rabbi, the only good you can find in this person is that they have a little piece of God in them?
You got to start somewhere. So that's a start. I always think of Rabbi Brad Artson, who was our dean in rabbinical school, who used to tell us, he's like, what do you do when you have, when you have a really difficult congregant? He's like, everybody's going to have one really difficult congregant that gets on your nerves. He's like, as a rabbi, what do? He's like, I'll give you my advice. He says, I always think to myself, what does their mother love about them? Like, everybody's mother loves them. So if you can look at them like your mother, and like as their mother, and be like, as their mother, I would love them. Then now you can deal with them with some compassion and deal with them more easily than you could if you're, rather than being frustrated and angry at you say like, oh, there's something good about them. Yes, Cindy.
Well, I just wanted to say that it's not up to us to judge somebody, because God is the ultimate judge. And we are actually, from reading this, we are actually doing a mitzvah by allowing that person the opportunity to atone.
Good. That's an important point here too. Were you guys say more or?
No, that's it. That's it.
No, that's an important point here too, is you think of kids, if kids keep hearing to themselves, this kid's a troublemaker, this kid's a bully, this kid's a cheat, this kid's not that smart, the kid comes to believe it. And believe it or not, adults are not that different. So if everybody's talking about what a horrible person this guy is and how awful this guy is, or how mean this woman is and how she's nasty to everybody and so on and so forth, that person eventually comes to believe that. But on the flip side, when you when you take a moment to judge that person towards the side of merit, when you take a moment, then that person also believes that too. And if they believe there's something good in them, then all of a sudden tshuva is possible for the other things.
I have to tell this story. A lot of times your ideas, if you want to see if your idea really holds up, take it to the extreme and see if it still works. If it still works, you're in good shape. So the story is, in the early 1980s, Elie Wiesel came to Birmingham to give a lecture at the JCC, and the auditorium was packed, gave a brilliant lecture. And there I was, very young at the time. And I said, and some of the lecture was about forgiveness. I said, What about Eichmann? Can we find somewhere in our hearts and our soul to forgive whatever he did in his life? And Elie Wiesel went bonkers and said, this guy is the most evil thing that has ever touched the earth. He should not be forgiven for anything. You can even hate him if you want, he just kind of went on and on. So in the extreme, is it possible that some people, we cannot find any good in someone?
It's sort of it seems to me it's sort of a burden to hold on to that kind of anger that, you see like families who've been devastated by the loss of a loved one because somebody has, killed somebody. And the mother of that person will offer the shooter like forgiveness, that she has let go of, anger, whatever. And, I'm not saying that I could do that, but I can see that if a person is able to do that, that they're actually doing themselves a favor. And this reading is like, well, you're doing that person a favor by allowing them the ability to do teshuva, but to hold on to whatever it is that you dislike about this person, what they have done or may not have done to you, to gnash it and rehash it, you're really just hurting yourself. And it takes a lot of energy to hold on to all those negative feelings and feelings of hurt and whatever it is. So, certainly I'm not casting stones at Elie Wiesel. And I do have a lot of respect for people who can let go of that kind of anger and hatred. And I could see how there would be a lot of healing in that kind of behavior.
I don't think that the people, and this is just my opinion, I don't think that people that really say they forgive people like that, I don't think they really forgive them. I think what they've done is released their anger toward those people. Because you can release your anger toward someone, and I know this personally, you can release your anger and not rehash everything, but you don't forget or forgive what they've done, but you let it go. So when people say, I forgive you, that's just this biblical Christian thing that they're supposed to be saying. And, but I don't think they really honestly forgive that person. How can you forgive somebody for taking your kid or something like that?
So I'll give you kind of two, were you going to say something, Shirley?
Yes,
Yeah.
I kind of can see both points from Tammy and Cindy, and I truly understand what Cindy is saying, because if you hold on to stuff, if you are angered, part of my journey, I think, was growing up in Manhattan when everything was rainbows, lollipops, and stuff, and come to Alabama, and you're practicing Judaism and people are cutting you off by your knees. So for a while, it made me very angry, because it's just like they did not see the person that I was, and a root of bitterness came up in my heart. And it really, as Cindy said, it starts to destroy you. It starts to hurt you, and you become sick. And I literally became sick from this root of bitterness because of the way people reacted to me. And I'm not just saying the whole Southern culture of discrimination, but growing up in a very Hamish environment, and then come down, and then you have, if this is not from Bethel, but having people say such horrible things to you who are Jewish, and you are attached to Jewish people. I was attached to Jewish people since I was 3 years old. And and they loved on me and they helped me and they mentored me. And that was my family. Jewish people were always my family. And to come down and to witness that kind of thing just really made me so sad. I would come home and cry and just lament over it. And in order to turn myself around, I really had to ask God to give me a spirit of love and forgiveness and to really let go of it so that I could heal myself. And I'm still in the process of healing. Before I was very kind of shy, and I mean, I could always speak technical things. I could always waltz in and do my medicine and teach my doctors or whatever. But being a person who was taught to be gracious and not to talk back and be nasty, it just really, but now, you know, I'm not nasty, but I really tell people exactly what is on my mind and what I feel. And I let go of it. I don't let this root of bitterness continue in my heart. And maybe, you know, it seems like I'm standoffish or I might take a back seat to stuff, but there's a reason why, because, you know, I've been attacked so many times. And
I know it's hard for you to share, Shirley, but I hope that being a part of this group may open you to the fact that, yes, there is some good in everybody.
yes, and it has always been good at Temple Bethel. When I came to Temple Bethel, it was like I was embraced. I had people who were like-minded, who were open to diversity. And I just, you know, I had one person say something to me and I said, you know, Temple Bethel actually treats their help better than other people treat other Jews. I'm like, well, that's what stood out to me. You know, it encompassed everyone. And I remember Ethelene Slaughter and her companion. And her companion used to come and read Torah, you know, like she was keeping up and she was keeping up with the prayers and everybody loved on her. And I remember Cindy Ziff and Irby Cohen and how, you know, and Ann Cohen, how they really took to me and they protected me. And so, you know, it's a blessing to be in this group. It really is a blessing. And this is what Judaism is about. This is what Tikkun is about, this group.
We're glad to have you be part of our group and to learn from and learn with you along the way.
Amen.
Mhm.
Amen.
Just to come back to Stuart's question, have any of you read the book The Sunflower?
Mm-mm.
So does anybody know the premise? All right, so I'll refer you, so I have two responses. I'll start with The Sunflower. Simon Wiesenthal wrote the book, and it's in two parts. The first part is Wiesenthal's story, and I won't give you the whole thing, but the short version is he was, while he was in the Holocaust, he is working at a site. They bring them over to this site every day and they're doing work. And one day when they're working, one of the guards says, "You, Jew." And Wiesenthal kind of looks at him and he goes, "You, come here." So Wiesenthal, what else is he going to do? He goes, follows the guard. And they go inside this building. The guard takes him inside this building, shows him, like, goes, like, finds a, like, goes to a room, points him to go inside. Wiesenthal goes inside, he closes the door. Inside the room is a single person, bandaged from head to foot on a hospital bed, who essentially confesses all. He says to Wiesenthal, I'm dying. I would like to confess all of my sins to you. And I would like, as a Nazi soldier, I would like to ask your forgiveness for my actions on behalf of the Jewish people. I won't tell you what happens. I won't tell you what Wiesenthal does. I'm not into spoilers. You got to read the book yourself. But that's the first half of the book, including he goes back to the concentration camp and, tells his, friends what happened, and they argue back and forth about what he should have done. And there's like a postscript to it also, and whatever. Part two is there's a series of essays by various philosophers, religious leaders, and such. I think if you get the second edition, I think Desmond Tutu has an article in there. Why did I just blank on her name? Deborah Lipstadt has an essay in there. And there like archbishops have, it goes like on it, like there's a whole list of different moral philosophers who all kind of debate, did Wiesenthal make the right choice? And essential to the argument is, what is the limit to forgiveness? And what are there limits to forgiveness in your tradition? Highly recommend the book. It's a fascinating book. Get the newest edition possible, because the newest edition has all of the old essays and then adds new ones to it, so you get new perspectives. The second response I will give is, when they captured Eichmann, they brought him to Jerusalem for trial. My father-in-law was the chief guard for Eichmann during his trial. You know how he got to be chief guard? My father-in-law was Moroccan. And he said, we cannot have any Ashkenazi guards. Why not?
Too angry.
Yes.
They're going to
Because
seek
they're
vengeance.
closer to it.
And he said, they're too close to it. They're going to seek vengeance for their family, and the world needs to know what Eichmann did. And if they kill him, they will never know what Eichmann did. So, they're famous. There's all these pictures of Eichmann standing trial in like a glass cube. If you look on the far side of that glass cube, there's a guard. That's my father-in-law standing to his left.
That's so interesting.
Amazing.
And they said, and he didn't talk about it frequently, but if you asked him about it, he said Eichmann was he was very organized, he was very courteous, he was very polite with everybody, including the guards. He was very respectful. When he was given a direction, he followed it meticulously well. He didn't argue with them, he didn't fight with them. He was a devout vegetarian, and there were guards who thought it would be fun to start giving him meat for dinner so that they could eat his portion and he'd have to go hungry. And they found out they got fired on the spot. They said, we're treating him like any other prisoner, because we need this to come out. Also, by the way, he used to take his shoes off when he'd come into his cell and put them to the side. And my wife will say, if you left your shoes by the door, he'd kick, like nicely by the door, he'd kick them when he walked in, when he saw them, because he couldn't stand the sight of those shoes neatly organized, because it reminded him of Eichmann. So yes, you don't necessarily the question isn't necessarily forgiveness. The question is, can you find something about this person? Yes, you can find something to say about about Eichmann. He was respectful to the guards. He was courteous. He was polite. Do you have to forgive him for what he did? No. but can you at least see him as a human being rather than as a monster? And I think when we elevate people to the level of monsters, they become irredeemable. And then we lose sight of how was he able to do it? If we say he was able to do it because he was a monster, then he becomes a special case, and it becomes, that's a unique circumstance, and that's never going to happen again. But if we say this is a human being who had other qualities, now all of a sudden we can look at him as a human being and say, great, how was he able to do this? And then once we understand that, we can stop it from happening again.
Yeah, that's my point about the forgiveness part. Yeah, I agree.
Well, and then punish him for the choices that he made.
Exactly.
Correct. He is still to this day the only person to have received capital punishment in the state of Israel.
Yeah, as you were saying, if you say that he is a monster, then that almost excuses his behavior. But I, I see what you're saying. It's helpful to realize that everybody is a human being. Everybody is responsible for their choices, and to name and to stereotype takes that humanity away. Yeah. So that, yes, we have to remember that when somebody does evil, that is a choice. That is a choice.
Yeah, when you take the humanity out of somebody, it allows you to do whatever you want to do to them without feeling bad about it. But we should keep in mind that all human beings are human beings, and they still have their humanity. And if eventually, if the Jewish people are to be judged for having put Eichmann to death, there's nothing people can say that we didn't treat him like a human being. We treated him like any other human being, and that's a very positive thing to be said.
And yes, look, yes, it can be. This is not an easy thing, and if it was an easy thing to do, Rebbe Nachman wouldn't have to say it. It's much easier to say Eichmann was a monster and was pure evil, but to have to find something positive about him, and then now all of a sudden we can treat him like a human being rather than as a monster. That being said, I really don't think that's where Rebbe Nachman is going with this conversation either. He's talking to his shtetl in Ukraine, in Breslov and Uman, trying to get them to see each other in a particular way. But yes, there is a level that we have to try to do this as well, this exercise as well. Other questions, comments?
I want to ask you a question, Rabbi, and you don't have to answer this if you feel like you can't. But you admitted that this was an audible. Did something? Are you able to share what made you pivot the lesson to this? And if not, that's okay. That's okay. You're a rabbi.
No, I think the short version is I don't think there's a specific incident or thing that occurred. I think it's more, I felt this was a more relevant lesson for our lives than what I was going to teach otherwise, which is a lovely teaching. I just didn't think it would ring as meaningfully as this might.
Clearly you hit home with this one.
Who wants to continue?
Go ahead.
I'll do it, Tammy. This phrase, a little more and he is not wicked, means that you need to search for a little more good that is still inside that person. For there he or she is not wicked. Because even though that person might seem wicked, how is it possible that there is still not a little bit of good within him or her? How is it possible that he or she has never done a mitzvah or a good deed? Through this, you find a little bit of good where the person is not wicked and you judge him or her favorably. Through this, you truly elevate that person from the side of guilt to the side of merit until the person does HaShuva because of this.
Just picturing like, yeah, he robbed a bank, but he held the door for his fellow robbers on the way out. Right? Like,
But in a sense, that's more damning to me, in the sense that if a person who seems wicked is able to do one good deed, and they have that in them, why shouldn't they be expected to do more good deeds?
You know, I just thought of The Godfather and The Sopranos, and how, like, you remember the famous scene where Michael is at the baptism of his nephew, and he's standing there and he's doing, he's being a godfather, and they're slaughtering everybody else in these other scenes. He's sent out this hit on all these people. And then I think of this one scene in The Sopranos. I love gangster movies, by the way. The Sopranos, when I think Tony had gone out and choked somebody to death, and then came back home and sat down and ate with his family, ate spaghetti, and I was like, my head was exploding, but they do. They have, they can compartmentalize things. So I guess that's what we have to think about, that Tony didn't kick his kids, or something. I don't know. It's hard.
so not just that, but, just because you do a mitzvah, just because I do a mitzvah, doesn't mean I'm always going to do a mitzvah either. Sometimes we're going to make the wrong choice. And like, oh, you can do one mitzvah, you should be able to do another one. Yeah, but sometimes you choose not to either. And so I hear you, Margaret, but at the same time, it's kind of like, nobody's going to be perfect either. And
Well,
so
yeah, I wasn't really going there,
but there's a level at which it goes that way, right? Like, well, you were able to hold the door open, so why didn't you do this, and why didn't you do that, and why didn't you do that? You should have been able to. And so I think there's a level at which, yeah, like, if you can see the humanity and see the imperfect nature, and when somebody does something wrong, say, but that person gave tzedakah last week too, right? Like, they might not have done something, they might not always be good, but can we find something good in them also? And look, I think that also, it kind of works for you also, because if you're sitting there condemning them for this one thing they did, then you're going to always have some kind of anger and frustration at them. But if you can see something good in them too, you're like, okay, yes, they did that, but okay, there's at least something good about this person. Too often we get caught up in all the bad things people do. We forget to actually look that there's some good things also.
Rabbi, like last week, it's kind of a reference to Tanya and the Alter Rebbe, when he wrote about the Binyanim. Like, the Binyanim is like in the middle, not really a Rasha and not really a Zadok, but in the middle. And so there's most people have a middle personality, a middle kind of soul expression.
Yeah, I always think of that. That always makes me laugh, because I always think of that during the high holidays. And there's a midrash that talks about, those who are entirely wicked on the high holidays are immediately written in the book of death. The entirely righteous are immediately written in the book of life. Everybody else is kind of like tentatively written in one, and then you have like the 10 days of tshuva between Rosh Hashanah and Yom Kippur to change God's mind. And I'm like, great, that's like 99.9% of the population right there is the Benoni. That's like everybody. Almost to the point that like the midrash becomes almost silly, because it's like, nobody's entirely righteous, nobody's entirely wicked. And that's a little bit what Rebbe Nachman is saying also, is like, everybody's Benoni, so you have to kind of work to find that good in everybody else. Everybody good so far?
Yeah, I mean, if you, I don't view, the part of your life of where you do deeds as like a box. And if you do all these, this is theoretically, you do all these good things, it theoretically could keep, there will be no space to do evil things. So you just do good things. But I don't think that that's a good analogy. I really think just because you do some horrible things does not mean, which might be 5% of what you do, might not mean that 95% of what you do could be very good things. So I think that allows you, put yourself in the shoes of a serial killer or something like that. They do things all day long that are probably very good, but they have this horrible aspect to them, and it doesn't exclude that they couldn't do good things.
Excellent. Everybody good? Ready to move on? All right. Who'd like to read next?
I'll do it.
Please.
Okay. This phrase, a little more and he is not wicked, implies that through finding in a wicked person some little bit of good where that person is not wicked, though this you consider his place and he is no more. This means that when you consider and see the place and the spiritual level, that person will no longer be in the original place, because you have found in him or her a little bit of good, some good point, Nakuda, and judge him and her favorably. Through this, you truly take the person out from the side of guilt to the side of merit. This is a little more, and he is not wicked, as we said, understanding this.
Good. I think we kind of get the gist. Rebbe Nachman does tend to repeat himself a lot, but
I can't buy this.
Huh?
I can't buy this.
Because?
Well, what I can buy is seeing that there is something somewhere, deeply hidden as it may be, of merit, or something that you can say, I've worked with killers and whatnot, and I know that, people have an aspect of them is good. The part that I don't buy, and I can see that, and I can, feel and see, and that that there is, something of God in everybody, however deeply hidden it may be. However, the point that you truly take the person out from the side of guilt to the side of merit, so that, somehow this tiny little thing, that this politeness of thing, unbalances the scales, so that the merit is elevated and the wickedness is diminished. That part I can't see.
So, good question. I don't think he's saying that by accepting this good point, suddenly this person's transgressions are forgotten and the merit goes up. But it does in your mind. I don't think he's talking about, say, the cosmic scales, but in your personal mental scale, the person changes, maybe not flipped all the way to merit, but if it's like this, you at least elevate them somewhat, because you're able to see that they're not entirely wicked.
But he says, at least this text says very clearly, from the side of wickedness to the side of merit.
Again, because I don't think he's talking about cosmic.
I understand whether it's cosmically or on your personal evaluation or even judgment of the person. I can understand. I just can't see that in either respect.
So let's take Robin Hood for a minute. I see, like, give me 1 second, Mickey. Let's take Robin Hood for a minute. If all you saw was Robin Hood stealing money and robbing people, you'd think this guy's a criminal. He's a schmuck. Like, he deserves to be thrown in jail. I'm re-voting for the sheriff of Nottingham to put an end to him. Right? If that's the only part you saw, you'd think he was a criminal and you'd have a negative feeling about him. However, if you now see him giving some of this money to poor people who really need it and supporting the poor, do you necessarily excuse the criminal aspect? Maybe not, but now you're able to say, okay, maybe he's not quite as bad a guy as I thought he was.
Well, okay, I'll agree that Robin Hood wasn't quite as bad a guy as I might have thought at the beginning of the story, but by golly, Pikeman is, as though he may have had a few redeeming qualities, he doesn't go to the side of merit.
No, but I think, again, to the point.
That's what it. So, well, that's enough of that. But I'm stuck on the actual text.
I think you're stuck on the truly part, and I think the truly is more meant for your own personal judgment more than anything else. But like, I think that's what Rebbe Nachman is, at least that's how I'm interpreting Rebbe Nachman in that phrase. It's not that in some level he's now an angel because you found that good point, but rather you're able to look at him in a slightly different light than you might otherwise. And
He's
might
not.
be able to judge him in a more human, favorable light than if you don't find that good point within him. Mickey, you
So
were-
instead of them being in the gutter, they're up on the curb now.
Going back to what Cindy said, that it's not up to us to judge. But I think when you've been the recipient of the wickedness, it's more difficult to look for that spark of good.
Yeah.
So I'm glad we're studying this, and I know that we should. But like I say, when you've been the recipient, it makes it a totally different story.
Very true. Yes, absolutely.
Well, and we're not lawyers, but you always have to put things in the context, and that might mitigate certain aspects. Thinking about what Margaret is thinking of judging that person, but there still is. Think about it, the priests, the Catholic priests, and the sexual abuse thing. I mean, it may well be that 98% of their time all day long was just wonderful and beautiful, giving to the community, and then they did these horrible things. I'm sorry, but I don't think that I think it is very hard to balance the scales to say what really is good enough to balance off that evil, etc. So I think in general their deeds need to be judged on their own merit, even though in the context of whatever they did.
But I would have to say that in most of our lives, most situations are not as extreme as a pedophile priest or Eichmann. Most of us just live in a place where the people in our lives can do horrible things to us just with their words and their actions. And it's helpful, especially like in families, just coming back from a family wedding, just saying. And I have a lovely family, but there is always a situation where somebody judges somebody harshly and holds a grudge and places that person in, this person is all evil. And where in truth, they really are not. And if we can find some space in our own lives to realize, well, maybe we don't know the whole story, giving that person maybe not the benefit of the doubt, even if the person hasn't changed over so many years, it's just too painful to hold on to whatever that hurt is. So, it's sort of like the thing where you say, and this is the opposite too. Oh, such a nice girl, but, okay. So in this case, such a horrible person, but, and if you can see the other side of the but, it's helpful. So maybe this teaching is not for the larger things. Maybe it's just for our everyday lives, helping us to get through and be happier, better adjusted people. And seeing the glass, it's another seeing the glass half full rather than half empty. I mean, it's too hard to hold on to anger. And sometimes people go to their grave holding on to anger and not talking to their brothers and their sisters. To me, that's the ultimate sin. And I don't want to go down that place.
Yes, Susan.
I was just going to say, thinking about what Cindy said, when we were first talking about, people who do evil things or whatever, I often think it's because of what's happened to them or because of their life experiences that they act out in this way. It's not because they're evil or, it's just that life has not necessarily been kind to them.
Agreed. One thing I kind of want to build on, and thank you, Cindy, because I did want to bring that back too, is that, I don't think Rebbe Nachman's talking about the extreme cases so much, but he's trying to help us learn how to live an everyday life. And in everyday life, we're not coming across Eichmann's, God willing, we're not coming across Eichmann's every day of our lives. But how do we deal with the everyday life? And I think to Mickey's point, and I think Cindy said it before too, is, it's not really up to us to judge, but we do. We do judge people based on what we see and what we, as kind of a natural reaction. And to Mickey's point, yes, it's particularly difficult to do when somebody does it to you. When somebody shoplifts from a store, you might think like, oh, what an awful person. But when they steal your wallet, it hits very differently. And yes, it can be very difficult to do, and it can be a very difficult spiritual practice. And that's a little bit of what Rebbe Nachman's trying to encourage, is to say, yes, what they did was horrible. He's not trying to excuse anything that the person did. He's just trying to say, you still have to acknowledge that this is a human being with a divine spark within them who did something bad, but is not an all bad person. And that can be challenging to do, especially when, as family occasionally is wont to do, keep hurting you over and over again by saying the same things over and over again. And it can be very hard to hear it over and over again. I know we're getting late. Does everybody have a few more minutes to keep going or no? Okay. Because he's now going to twist this a little more. And I think this is actually the part he wants to get to. Somebody want to read it?
I'll read it. Similarly, a person needs to also find a little bit of good in himself or herself. It's known that a person needs to be very careful to always be joyous and distance himself or herself very, very far from sadness, as I have explained several times. Even when a person begins to look at oneself and sees that he or she has nothing good inside, but is full of sins, the evil one wants to make the person fall through this sadness and bitter darkness, God forbid. Nevertheless, a person is prohibited from falling because of this.
So I was just trying to make
Rather, one needs to search and find himself, herself, some little bit of good. How is it possible that he, she has never done some mitzvah or good deed? Even when one begins to look at that good deed, he or she may see that it is filled with flaws and dishonesty. Even this mitzvah or holy deed that he, she merited doing was filled with impure motives and thoughts and numerous thoughts. Even with all this, how is it possible that there wasn't in that mitzvah or holy deed some little bit of good? In any case, how is it possible that there was not a good point in the mitzvah or good deed that he did?
There's a reason why my teacher, Rav Pinchas Giller, used to say, there's a reason Breslov attracts a certain kind of person. This is like Rebbe Nachman comes back to this point over and over again. But it's an interesting way of teaching in that he says you should always find a good point in somebody else, not judge everybody else for their deeds. But also, you need to judge yourself in the same way. You need to look at yourself and find and recognize that there's good points in you also, and that you're a good person also. And even if you think all those things were bad, like you haven't done anything good, you've surely done a mitzvah at some point in your life. And even if you want to say that mitzvah was flawed, I really did it for ulterior motives, but you still did it. There was something good in that mitzvah at that moment. You're not a bad person. And how do you take yourself out of that space to be able to see you're a good person also? And to not judge yourself, and to judge yourself to the side of merit.
But I think that's psychologically very, I guess the word is overused, but I would say empowering in that, once you crack that view of yourself as a bad person and you can find something, then you begin to find more things and more things and more things, and eventually end up with a less critical or negative view of yourself. And I think it's certainly true that a lot of people tend to be very harsh and judging everything that they do as not being all the way up to snuff.
Well, you could say judge others as you would judge yourself, which of course gets back to what we talked about last week, which, the golden rule, right? It's some corollary to the golden rule, I think.
Yes. And so it's interesting the way he teaches it, because he teaches it first about other people and then about yourself. But you want to see that yourself there's a good in yourself. You need to find that good in yourself. Then you also need to be able to do that with other people also. That other people deserve that same kind of love and compassion that you do for yourself. They deserve that also. And he kind of repeats a lot of this. He continues going on. I won't keep you guys too much longer, but if you want, I can send it to you guys and then we can talk about it another time. But there's a point here in which he tries to say that, keeping in mind, by the way, that Rebbe Nachman, in my unprofessional opinion, was probably bipolar. And he went from moments from when he thought he was the Messiah to when he thought he was worthless and nothing and couldn't teach anybody anything. But in those moments when you feel that way, you have to ask yourself, really? Like, is that really true? Or is there something good I have ever done? Have I ever done something good? And if you try to wipe away all the good things that you've done, you say, but there was something good in each of those things that I did them. So now that I can, once you find that little point that's good inside of you, then you can try to build on that and find another good point and another good point and another good point until you don't feel that you're such an awful human being anymore. And you should be doing that for other people as well. And as we learned about last time we studied Rebbe Nachman, you can do that for things that happen in the world and say, this is awful, this is terrible, this is horrible, and there has to be some good that comes out of it. And you have to be able to find at least a little good in everything. Because if you don't find a good in things, then you're going to be stuck constantly being weighed down by all the bad in the world. Questions, comments, thoughts?
I think we ought to take a field trip to Uman next year.
Well, let's see what the situation in Uman is like before we plan any field trips. But
well, I was on a plane with a lot of people going to Uman, coming out of Israel one time, and they sure seem to be having a good time. Plenty of a lot of joyousness to go around.
And that's a key part of Breslov Hasidism, is joy.
Of course, they were all men, but that's another story.
It's amazing how they were able to procreate, isn't it?
There's a challenge in learning about different rebbes of saying, try to boil them down into one word. If you're going to try to boil down Kedushat Levi, Reb Levi Yitzchak of Berdichev, I'd probably boil his word down to love. How do you love God? How does God love you? How do you love each other? Is a big part of his deal. Rebbe Nachman of Breslov, joy. How do you find joy how do you find light and joy in yourself? How do you find light and joy in other people? How do you find light and joy in the world? Because you need that to be able to survive also.
I'm glad that you went to the Audible. This was a good one.
I am glad to hear that. I actually love Rebbe Nachman. A fascinating guy. I actually really enjoy his teachings and his learnings. It's a little off the wall sometimes, but I love that about him too. Any last questions, comments, thoughts? Then I will wish
his
you.
book, but I have his volumes, but I never got this far. So now you challenge me to go through this.
Yeah, there's actually a method of studying both the Tanya and Likutei Moharan, which is the main book of Rebbe Nachman. You study a little bit every day and you get through it in a year. And there's like an annual schedule of how you study it. When I'm done with my Talmud study in about 4 years, maybe I'll take up Likutei Moharan. I don't know. Or maybe I'll take up the Tanya or something else. I don't know. I've got 4 years to figure it out. So
Tanya is very interesting, Rabbi. I think I told you that I have been studying with Hasid in Florida, and I've learned a whole lot about myself, which I think is what it's all about. If you believe in your soul and you believe in joy, that's the basis of Tanya. It's a lot more complicated. Big book.
Tanya's tough, but as we saw last week, I think when we were reading it, it's tough, but be well, everybody. Thanks for coming. Good to learn with y'all. Stay well, be well, and learn.
Have a good
Learning
week.
with you next
Thank
week.
you.
Take care, y'all.
All righty.